Now, there is obviously some utility to the word terrorism in humanitarian and international law, but that's just not really what's typically being discussed when most people say this stuff about Hasan. Most of them are just saying he supports terrorism and terrorism is bad, which is not really an argument. I have a lot more to say about this topic, but I'll keep it short and say that you're kind of telling on yourself if your big criticism of Hasan is that he, quote, supports terrorism. Because while he does express views that a lot of people find uncomfortable, his position on this is actually closer to that of a significant portion of international legal scholars, human rights organizations, and frankly, a lot of the world outside of the West.
And the entirety of the scholarly work on anti-colonial resistance movements. Remember, my position is literally international law, okay? That occupied peoples have a right to defend themselves militarily against an occupation. That is just straight up international law. You can get mad about it, but all of this like terror jacketing nonsense, all this like terrorism, he's a terrorist, he supports terrorism, all of that is a way to sidestep the actual conversation that many of these people are not mentally equipped to have. What gives?
Антисемитизмом называется распространение вражды к евреям. Когда проклятая исламская монархия доживала свое последнее время, она старалась натравить темных рабочих и крестьян на евреев.
Let's start with one of the most widespread and craziest headlines about Hasan that still gets repeated to this day. Hasan visited a brothel in Germany that was raided for trafficking minors. Now, this story comes in a few different forms depending on who's telling it. You've got Dan, who very strategically says that Hasan visited a brothel that was later raided for human trafficking. Nuxtaku more aggressively states that the brothel was raided for the trafficking of at least one minor. And on the most extreme end of the spectrum, Destiny outright claims that Hasan literally raped a 15-year-old. So here's what actually happened. A long time ago, Hasan visited the legal Artemis brothel in Berlin, which is a pretty famous and reputable establishment. In 2016, this brothel was raided on suspicion of human trafficking, but the entire process, which involved 530 investigators, yielded no results. In fact, the authorities recommended no changes to the brothel's employment process or working conditions. And in present day, they're actually 100% compliant with Germany's Prostitution Protection Act. When the public prosecutor's office tried to salvage some remaining charges out of this case, the court rejected all of them. And it's noted here that it's rare for an indictment in Berlin to be considered so weak that it doesn't even open a trial. As a result of all of this, the local government publicly apologized to the Artemis brothel and compensated them almost $300,000 for damages caused. Now, there is one truthful element to this story. The raid was prompted by a witness whose abusive older boyfriend had been forcing her to work at the brothel, and she was reportedly underage. Her pimp was sentenced to 7 years for this. But this was just one criminal using an otherwise legal venue to exploit somebody. This wasn't...
Which not, by the way, in like 2017 or 2016, like 6 years after the fact, and the brothel is still in operation, which is what's so fucking insane about it.
The brothel itself trafficking kids. And the only reason you would ever care about someone supporting a business where something like this happened is if the business itself did something that led to it happening. And following an extremely thorough investigation, a court rejection, and a formal apology from the city, that pretty clearly seems to not be the case here. So if you're telling me your standard is that all 100,000 people who visit the brothel each year are child rapists because of this one isolated incident, I just think you're lying. It's been speculated that the primary reason for the raid was actually that the city was missing out on substantial tax revenue because of the pay structure of the workers. Now, we can't know if that's true or not, but it is entirely possible that this whole thing had almost nothing to do with that one incident at the brothel. And to top it all off, that lone isolated incident happened 6 years after Hasan visited Germany. So this entire child trafficking claim about Hasan is built on a story about one incident that happened 6 years after he was there at a brothel that was never even charged with anything and was compensated for the investigation. And as a side note, I also want to mention that Artemis ended up donating said compensation to a children's hospital. So happy endings. This whole story is really just a lazy way to desperately try to attach bad things to Hasan's name.
I said that Hasan Piker visited a brothel that was later raided for suspected sex trafficking. Actually, Hasan wasn't there. Yeah, that matters. Yeah, that matters. And misleading. That matters.
So while the underlying facts about this claim are somewhat true, the implications about Hasan that people make from them are deliberately misleading. Next claim. Hasan threatened to kill a U.S. senator. You may remember from earlier that one of Nuxtaku's tweets actually alleges that Hasan has threatened to kill 2 U.S. senators. So no, this isn't about Rick Scott, this is about Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas, who in 2024 posted a tweet encouraging people stuck behind pro-Palestinian protesters to take matters into your own hands. He then went on Fox News and suggested that in Arkansas, protesters would be thrown off of bridges.
If something like this happened in Arkansas on a bridge there, let's just say I think there'd be a lot of very wet criminals that have been tossed overboard, not by law enforcement, but by the people whose road they're blocking.
Hasan in response quote tweeted Cotton with a diagram of the homemade shotgun used in the assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. So is this a threat? Technically, yes, in the same way that Hasan technically threatened that chatter that was calling for his hanging. But to be clear, an elected official was calling for violence against the American public, and I'm supposed to object to somebody using a meme to threaten him back? Look, maybe this is just me, but if our elected leaders start threatening us with violence, frankly,
I went to the brothel and they have your picture up on the wall that has all the famous people who visit the brothel. Shut the fuck up. Are you serious? That's crazy.
kind of hope that someone would threaten them back. So you can say Hasan's response here was irresponsible or stupid if you want.
Wait, really?
But to say Hasan threatened to kill a U.S. senator while ignoring that it was a response to a call to violence is, at best, seriously misleading.
Nope,
Next,
Lamau,
Hasan
fuck
said that
you, man. God damn it. I got stoked.
Ela Klein was a valid military target. This one got picked up everywhere. Ethan and Ela started claiming that Hasan was calling for violence against her, and Asmongold was similarly flabbergasted.
If somebody attacks Ela Klein, they're gonna go to jail. Why is he telling people this? Why would he be what is wrong with you? He's making a direct call for violence. That's insane. Oh my God.
Yeah, that would be insane if I was doing that. And I would have been promptly banned if I was doing that. So much of this stuff is just them imagining a totally separate reality and then being like, why is he not getting punished for this thing that I imagine he was doing when it's clear he wasn't doing it? What gives?
But here's what Hasan actually said.
Like any kind of violence that Israeli settlers or the Israeli military experiences in the West Bank is literally legal. It is legal resistance against an occupying military force. I cannot repeat this enough. Every type of armed resistance against both the settlers and also the Israeli occupying force in the West Bank. Doesn't matter if it's your favorite podcasters like Wife that participate in these raids. The violence that the Palestinians engage in an act of resistance against this illegal occupying force is literally legal, definitionally legal.
So clearly Hasan is discussing international law as it relates to resistance against military forces in a legally occupied territory. He says that violent actions against settlers who are conducting military operations in these territories is completely fine, and included your favorite podcaster's wife probably as a jab at Ela to be a little bit of a shithead. But for context, many people often dismiss Ela's role in the IDF as being just that of a secretary, despite her at one point volunteering to participate in a highly questionable night raid into Ramallah.
You told me once you went on like a mission with them.
Also, remember when I got Ethan to admit that? I got Ethan to call his wife a terrorist. Another debate that people were like, "Oh, Ethan owned you." Okay.
To like a terrorist city.
Yeah, they took me with them one night, even though they weren't supposed to. I just wanted to see what it's like.
So Hasan was quite obviously not saying that somebody should attack Ela Klein. He said that people engaged in military operations in a legally occupied territory are, under international law, valid targets, like Ela would have been while she was doing that. So whether Hasan is correct or not, the way the Kleins presented his statements here, and the way many people subsequently reported on them, is completely wrong. All right, next. Hasan called babies valid targets. So this one stems from the final episode of The Leftovers on October 12th of 2023, where Hasan and Ethan are discussing comments made by another creator who argued that all Israelis are occupiers, not civilians. Here's a clip that got circulated around.
Palestinians have the legal ground to violently seize back their own homes from the settlers. This is a reality, and that is precisely the reason why they have to exist under endless occupation in the West Bank.
You know what? And that's why I say, if it was settlers, that would be a lot more understandable. Yeah. But let's not obfuscate. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but this dude just called babies militants.
No, I understand. And there are baby settlers as well. But there are baby settlers as well. There are babies in the settlements.
This very truncated clip got picked up everywhere. Stitch Adam, for instance, cut a video titled, "Hasan claims babies are the same as soldiers." As a result, to this day, many believe that Hasan was implying that babies are valid military targets. But the clip conveniently leaves out what happened just minutes earlier. Hasan and Ethan are discussing JT Chapman's statements about there not being any civilians in Israel proper, as he considers it occupied territory.
If Germany invaded the United States, and they said, you know what, Cincinnati, Ohio is our ancestral home, and everyone knows that's blatantly false, but they take your home, they murder your grandma, they bulldoze like your neighbor's house. Are those people civilians there? No, they're occupiers, and those are criminals. There are no civilians there.
Hasan and Ethan both go on to disagree with these statements.
I do not agree with that because I don't think that is a reasonable solution.
Do you think what he said is evil?
I think it is, one, unproductive, and two, it does not meet the realities on the ground, and it's not a viable solution.
And after a bit more discussion, Ethan asked Hasan directly about babies being combatants, which Hasan, in no unclear terms, rejects.
So calling, just to be clear, calling babies...
No, of course not.
...settlers...
Of course.
And they're not even living...
They're not.
Okay,
yeah, they're babies. You can't say this
in
2023. I agree.
Thank you for agreeing.
So Hasan using the term baby settlers was just him clarifying what someone else was saying. And as for valid targets, this is another example of Hasan getting clipped dishonestly, when he explicitly said the opposite of what people are claiming he said. This one is also a lie. Moving on. Hasan would put capitalists in re-education camps. This one also comes from the leftovers, where Hasan and Ethan are having a hypothetical conversation about what implementing socialism would look like, specifically how you handle people that don't want it.
What do you do if they're like, nah, fuck that, we're doing capitalism?
Hasan's position is pretty straightforward. He doesn't think this would ever happen in an ideal society, obviously because it's ideal. So to him, it's kind of an inherently weird question.
If everything is given to you, if every single thing is given to you, if all of your problems are solved, then there is no need for conflict of that regard.
But he goes on to say that re-education could be a potential solution specifically for those that commit violent terrorism in the name of capitalism.
The solution to that would always be education.
Re-education?
Re-education, certainly, yeah.
Funnily enough, Ethan is the one that keeps introducing camps into this conversation, and Hasan has to keep saying no to it.
I know that that's like a
Let's put
trigger
them in
word.
camps.
No, not like that.
Well, China does that.
Are you talking about like resident schools? Are you talking about the
China has
Xinjiang? Yeah,
re-education.
100%. They do. They do it. They did it in Xinjiang,
Which
I
isn't
think
good,
was,
right?
No, I don't agree with that. Yeah, I don't think it was good. This is something I have openly criticized as well.
So what would be good about a social?
You know what's really crazy about this, by the way? Ethan and I had this conversation. He knows my full perspective, obviously. We had this conversation, and he still fucking put that shit in the context, Snook. He put that shit in the context, Snook, where he was like, Hasan wants to do re-education to capitalists, and he loves, putting Uyghur Muslims in re-education camps in Xinjiang. Isn't that fucking nuts? I mean, what a fucking slime dog, dude. What a fucking Weaselly little liar.
Socialist re-education camp for capitalists.
I don't think it'd be camps. I mean, it depends on crime, right?
No, man, he didn't fucking forget. He just knows. He knows. He's just a disingenuous asshole.
People committing crimes at the behest of this.
So Hasan explicitly rejects camps, rejects the Chinese model, and is literally just describing criminal rehabilitation. For some reason, people just restate Hasan's words and frequently cite him as wanting to put any and all capitalists in re-education camps. But that's literally not what he said. This one is also bullshit. The next claim is basically just...
That's why it's also really fucked up, because like once this sets in, and if you were to ask like the random fucking person that's like even seen some of these like edge, if they've even participated in any of these communities at all, or if they've like kind of seen a video or a clip here or there, it's ironic if they were to come up to me and ask me, like, oh, do you agree with this? And I say no, right? They would be like, oh, you're just lying to me now. It's like, no, I never. That's my previous position as well. Yeah, Ethan, with the brothel thing too. Ethan knows what the truth is about the brothel situation because we covered it on the fucking broadcast. We covered it on Leftovers. He read the article about how the German brothel got fucking compensation from the Berlin government for slander.
Something about Hasan encouraging violence. This one's a bit nebulous because it's not really any specific incident. It's more of a general vibe that people have that he just kind of broadly encourages violence.
Videos of Hasan's violent rhetoric.
He is the one encouraging violence on a regular basis.
It's so obviously a call to violence.
I am so tired of this man and his violent rhetoric.
And look, Hasan absolutely uses incendiary language. He said things like this.
You need to be fucking showing your opponent's guts on there, okay? You need to be gutting them. You need to be shanking these motherfuckers and letting their intestines just rot.
Yeah, in a debate.
On stage. What the fuck is this shit, man? Slice them and fucking dice them. What the fuck is this?
Which I'm sorry, but that's just funny. But it's also just metaphorical. He's talking about political debates. He's saying Democrats need to be more aggressive and cutthroat in debates. It's not an actual call to violence, it's just being expressive and provocative. What you won't find if you actually watch Hasan's content is any encouraging or advocating for direct violence.
I don't think violence against civilians is justified.
I would never advocate for violence against a political enemy.
Any kind of violence against civilians is completely unjustifiable.
The bad faith version of this stuff was on full display after Charlie Kirk's assassination, when certain people, like Tectone, used these obviously figurative expressions as evidence that Hasan openly calls for violence. And this happened again after the recent assassination.
Wait, what was that one? Hasan, Charlie Kirk, guys, you know someone's got to do it. I don't even know where
figurative
the fuck that's
expressions
coming
as
from.
evidence that Hasan openly calls for violence. And this happened again after the recent assassination attempt on President Trump, when people like Short Fed Otaku seemingly reflexively start blaming Hasan. But there is absolutely no evidence for this. In fact, that shooter seems to have been pretty openly oppositional to Hasan on social media. There's also no real evidence of Charlie Kirk's assassin being a Hasan fan either. So this idea that Hasan encourages any actual violence is very dumb, and the instances people point to as evidence for it are often entirely made up. So it'd be more honest if this critique was just that it's irresponsible for Hasan to speak the way that he sometimes does. But at that point, I just think you're kind of being a baby. All right, next. Hasan shocked his dog. The story doesn't need much introduction. Hasan's dog, Kaya, appeared to yelp on stream when he reached for something on his desk, and the internet exploded with speculation that he used a shock collar on her. This prompted one of the most frenzied online news cycles ever about Hasan.
Maybe skip this one. No, I mean, I don't care at this point. Literally, either people believe it, don't give a shit. People believe it, do give a shit, but don't care about it as much. Or people don't believe it, and understandably, there are plenty of people in this community who are like, this is fucking bullshit. But there are also people who don't believe it and keep advancing it. Okay. And I would go so far as to say the people who keep pushing this beyond like memes, beyond jokes, which many people are just doing memes at this point because that's just what it is. But it's just a meme at this point. But there are people who will go, why are you laughing about this? This is serious. This is serious. You're a fucking dog abuser. You're a dog abuser. And the irony is those people are oftentimes in this column. And therefore, nobody takes them seriously.
Where for weeks, #Collargate was all anybody talked about. Hasan denied using the collar. People analyzed every frame of the incident, and it still gets brought up to this day. Now, I will say, as far as whether Hasan shocked Kaya or not, based on all the available evidence, it's probably true. But here's the thing. Kaya is obviously a well-cared-for animal. She goes on multiple walks a day, she has regular playtime with other dogs, and everyone attests to how loved and spoiled she is.
I have the best dog. It's crazy. Like, if there was a dog Olympics, like, she literally clears it. She is the #1.
And shock collars, while not my preference, are a legal and still somewhat widely used training tool. This is basically the dog equivalent of spanking a child. You can disagree.
The irony is Fox News also destroyed shock collar gate because they snapped paparazzi pictures outside of my fucking house of Kaya going on a walk, and people figured out that it was a vibe collar. As I've been saying, it was a vibe collar. But it is kind of funny that, you know, everyone stopped talking about that. They just don't give a fuck.
Agree with it, and I do also. But the idea that this represents some pattern of abuse is pretty silly. And if Hasan does use a shock collar and then lied about it, I kind of get why, considering the situation led to some people filing reports to have Kaya taken away. Does anybody really think it would be better for Kaya to be entered into the foster system rather than staying in the LA mansion where she seems to live a largely spoiled and happy life? Look, if you want to criticize him for using a shock collar, that's totally fine. That is a legitimate concern. But this story quickly stopped being about Kaya and turned into yet another desperate scramble for a smoking gun to use against Hasan.
Do I personally care about Kaya? I could give a fuck about Kaya. That said, it's fair to push this because it hurts Hasan, and Hasan is a bad person.
Spending a month covering it, filing animal welfare reports, and demanding Twitch ban him over this. These just aren't really proportionate responses to what he actually did. So I don't know, man, this obviously isn't ideal, but to me, even as someone who doesn't eat meat.
Yeah, he falls in the camp of he did it, but who gives a shit? Like, at a certain point, most people are going to be like, why are you, like, it's very clear that this guy doesn't abuse his dog. What the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? It's just like, it's so fucking funny that the best thing that could have happened was me just like joking about it myself, and then all of those people getting super butthurt.
And also likes dogs. It's just not that serious. Chill the fuck out. Next, Hasan supports terrorism. Even just engaging with this claim makes me feel like I'm losing on principle. And just to be clear, I don't really think that anything I'm about to say is particularly insightful. But what does supports terrorism even mean? Because if it means speaks positively of organizations that have been designated as terrorist groups by the US Department of State, then yeah, sure, he does do that. But when most people, especially apolitical commentators, say this about Hasan, that's not really what they're saying. They're using it as this severe moral condemnation, as though it's just self-evidently true that supporting any terrorist group is morally horrible. End of conversation. But if your definition of a terrorist is just whoever the government says is one, then surely you think anybody who supported the American Revolution or Nelson Mandela is a bad guy.
Kayagate is still X's favorite. He brings it up daily. Brother, Gucci bag. Let it go, bro. Let it go. He's gonna keep hitting every vein he can. Someone was telling me that XQC was talking about the brothel shit. Who gives a fuck, brother? Can you not tell? He feels slighted. He feels fucked up about the decisions that he made in his life that caused him, that caused him to isolate himself from people that he was friends with, myself included. And he wanted to get the bag. It's okay. He will always be recognized. He will always be recognized as a legendary content creator for a lot of young people. A lot of the FaZe boys, they all fucking grew up watching XQC. And he will forever sit around and do everything in his power to just be like, you know what? Fuck Hasan. It's nothing different than this group of fucking weirdos. Now, to be fair to XQC, unlike these fucking losers, he's just kind of a piece of shit. He's a piece of shit. He's selfish. He doesn't care about other human beings. He's much nicer to people in person, but when the cameras are on, he's a giant fucking asshole. And on top of that, he's been, pummeling and pumping unlimited amounts of fucking gambling content for a cryptocurrency that gave him $100 million. ultimately, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He is never in a million years. He's going to watch this clip and milk it for a week now. Yeah. But again, is that different than any number of different people that fucking despise me? I'm still here. I miss the old juicer. I'm sure there are plenty. I don't even know if they have the old juicers in his community at this point.
That doesn't sound right. So if that's not your definition, and it's something more like someone who carries out political violence...
He was crying last week that you are the reason coworker Wig doesn't invite him to events anymore. Dog, AT&T is the reason why I don't get invited to coworker Wig events. The fuck's he talking about? How do I have this level of power and influence? By a guy who had to distance himself from me by being like, he's my coworker. I wouldn't go to his funeral. I actually don't like the guy. Again, none of that shit even makes sense. I'm not even at the event. Am I capable of stopping Ludwig from disinviting or uninviting XUC? How the fuck does that work? Perhaps it's because he's kind of an asshole. And by that, I'm not talking about Ludwig. I'm talking about XUC. He's an asshole who has, for many, many years, when he was at the fucking tippy top of the game, greatly abused his prominence and his influence to mistreat people, to treat people like shit, including people like Ludwig, Ludwig was incredible to him. You know, I've opened my home to XQC too, but Ludwig literally fucking opened his entire home. Not only is he super flaky and he bails on everything, but like there's been a lot of like behind the scenes help too, and he's just an asshole. So what? At a certain point, if you're going to consistently be a fucking asshole, people are going to be like, all right, man, it's not worth the headache. Yeah.
Against civilians, then unfortunately groups like the IDF are also terrorists, and people who call their pilots heroes are supporting terror. I think there are basically two types of people who make this criticism. The first one, which is probably the vast majority, is somebody who just hasn't thought very hard about what terrorist actually means, or how the list of them is historically just determined by the interests of those in power as much as...
Yeah. This.
Mr. Trump.
Clout hungry. Clout. Desperate for clout. That's it. Linking up with some of the worst motherfuckers out there. So I don't really give a shit if he calls me a dog shocker. X was also trying to poison the well by bringing up Kaigate the shit to Tyler 1, and Tyler 1 basically was just like, Hasan was cool to me in person. I don't know. Yeah. And no, I mean, it's just, you know, desperate.
Anything else. But the other much smaller percentage of people that make this criticism are probably just saying that he's supporting groups that they don't personally agree with supporting. But this sounds like way less of a moral condemnation and more like you just disagree. Like, are you saying your big moral issue with Hasan is that he supports the rebel group in Yemen instead of the Western-backed government, who, by the way, have likely killed far more civilians than the Houthis have? Norway is an example of a country that does have a list of designated terrorist groups, a list that notably does not include the Houthis. So if Hasan moved to Norway, would he then be all good to go on saying positive things about them? And furthermore, somebody supporting the cause of a group like the Houthis doesn't mean that they support all of their tactics.
Any kind of violence against civilians is completely unjustifiable.
Speaking positively of a group is not the same as endorsing every action they've ever taken, and collapsing that distinction is how you wind up with a completely useless definition of support. Now, there is obviously some utility to the word terrorism in humanitarian and international law, but that's just not really what's typically being discussed when most people say this stuff about Hasan. Most of them are just saying, he supports terrorism, and terrorism is bad, which is not really an argument. I have a lot more to say about this topic, but I'll keep it short and say that you're kind of telling on yourself if your big criticism of Hasan is that he, quote, supports terrorism. Because while he does express views that a lot of people find uncomfortable, his position on this is actually closer to that of a significant portion of international legal scholars, human rights organizations, and frankly, a lot of the world outside of the West.
And the entirety of the scholarly work on anti-colonial resistance movements. Remember, my position is literally international law, okay? That occupied peoples have a right to defend themselves militarily against an occupation. That is just straight up international law. You can get mad about it, but all of this like terror jacketing nonsense, all this like terrorism, he's a terrorist, he supports terrorism, all of that is a way to sidestep the actual conversation that many of these people are not mentally equipped to have. That's it. Yeah, grassroots volunteer groups defend their town against their rising settler violence, fundamentally describes the PLO, Hamas, PFLP, Hezbollah, and all other anti-Zionist resistance factions. When these guys get too effective, Israel will just bomb them and say they're terrorists. Yeah, Palestinians in Sinjil, Occupy West Bank, have formed a grassroots volunteer group to defend their town from rising settler violence, saying the Israeli military and their own government have proved unable or unwilling to protect them.
I mean, hell, George Lucas made billions of dollars off of terrorism. So to be honest, I can't even really evaluate the truth of this claim, because it's kind of a nonsensical, thought-terminating criticism, and I don't even really know what the fuck people are actually saying when they make it. And speaking of terrorism, Hasan interviewed a terrorist. Let's keep this brief. Hasan interviewed Rashid al-Haddad in early 2024. He's a Yemeni influencer and self-described media personality and photographer. Hasan was under the impression before the interview that Rashid was affiliated with the Houthis, probably because of the nickname that people gave him on social media, but he quickly corrected himself when he realized that he wasn't. There is no evidence that Rashid participated in seizing any ships or has any formal Houthi association. People use really dumb pieces of evidence to say, oh no, he is a Houthi, like this Instagram comment, where he just says he is a soldier, which could mean almost anything. Or the photos that he took on this captured vessel, which was open to the public for photos. But ultimately, it wouldn't really matter if he was a Houthi. Hasan should be allowed to interview terrorists on stream.
Yes, 100%. I'm not on Twitch, but people do it all the fucking time. And yes, of course, I reserve the right to be able to do that, which I made very clear. That was another one of these fucking arguments that I found so stupid, because I was like, he's not a Houthi, but I will and should be able to interview a Houthi if I fucking want to. Like, that's what's so fucking crazy, where I was like, they would be like, oh, you interviewed a Houthi and you're lying about it. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just telling you what the fucking truth is, you stupid idiot. And I'm also telling you, like, I would do it.
There's just no evidence that this guy is one. Rashid is currently suing Ethan Klein for repeatedly calling him a terrorist. So based on the evidence that we have, this one's also kind of bullshit. And finally, Hasan is anti-Semitic. This claim could be its own video, and this one's long enough as it is, so I'll keep this brief too. The evidence that people cite for Hasan being anti-Semitic is either extremely amorphous and vague, or simply not good evidence at all. There's him calling a chatter pig dog,
You fucking bloodthirsty, violent pig dog. Suck my dick.
which people claimed was an anti-Semitic slur, even though it doesn't appear in common anti-Semitism glossaries.
Because it's not! Because they made it up after the fact. They just sit around and wait for me to say something creative. They literally, it's not. It's so not that, like, most people don't even know what it is, where they're like, what? I don't really know. This one, yeah, maybe it's because he said pig, and, you know, people used to call pigs, Jews pigs. Is that what it is? I don't really fully get it, but it's fine. They made it up. It's an ad hoc response. They made it up after the fact. It's in Shrek, dude. Puss in Boots calls people capitalist pig dogs. It's in fucking Shrek. It's in Command and Conquer 3. It's so ridiculous. It's made up. It's made up. But again, this is how easy it is.
And Hasan primarily uses it to describe capitalists and imperialists.
You imperialist, capitalist pig dog, you fucking violent murderer of the third world.
There's him calling Orthodox Jewish settlers inbred, which was clearly just supposed to be an insult directed at people who subscribe to a racist ideology, not Jewish people as a group.
You know, the broad majority of the ultra-Orthodox are also unimaginably racist and very much pro-Israel. I can't wait for these inbred motherfuckers to have to serve and see what happens to the IDF.
And beyond that, most of the rest of it are just these nebulous, broader claims about his positions on Israel and how they point to an underlying bigotry. But almost every single example that people use for this often could be better explained by him simply being anti-Zionist. For instance,
at least Twitch waits for you, waits for the stream to be finished before they ban you. See you in 7 days, chat. No, that's not. Dude, we're literally talking about the fact that it's not a term that was not even vaguely considered an anti-Semitic term. Like, that's not. This is worse than even fucking Crackergate, if that's the case. Then anything and everything could be considered a slur. That's the whole point. Like, I'm sorry. That's crazy.
people often point to things like Hasan saying that rapes having happened on October 7th wouldn't change his perspective as evidence of anti-Semitism. But that's not anti-Semitic. It's actually a pretty consistent application of Hasan's anti-imperialist framework. And if there's a perceived double standard in how aggressively he talks about Israel versus other actors, it could very easily be explained by his own family background in the Middle East, or the region's history, rather than automatically assuming it's just secret racial animus towards Jews. He isn't uniquely fixated on Jewish institutions. He applies this same lens to American imperialism, Saudi Arabia, capitalism, and plenty of other power structures. I think in 2026, if you look for anti-Semitism hard enough, you'll kind of see what you want to see. But the idea that this progressive, leftist, anti-class, equality-minded type of audience are actually secretly racist towards this one group of people, it's a pretty big stretch when these people are consistently anti-racist on every other axis. Now, the more sophisticated version of this argument is that even if Hasan never says anything explicitly anti-Semitic, his rhetoric still functions to foster hostility towards Jewish people, even if that isn't his intent. This is basically the functional racism version of the argument. It's the same thing as saying voter ID laws are racist. It's not because the people writing them necessarily want to disenfranchise black people, but because they do disproportionately cause that to happen. But for one, that argument requires you to subscribe to a view of racism that isn't really speaking to the character or intent of the individual, which kind of makes it have less bite. And two, that's if you subscribe to that framework, which I personally don't. So in my opinion, calling Hasan anti-Semitic isn't even misleading. It's just not substantiated. There are obviously a lot more claims we could go through, but the pattern is pretty clear. The lies about Hasan Piker that come from this side of the internet
Oh, the
are
make
pervasive.
drones one, that was awesome. Laura Loomer loves using that. The just make drones to do acts of terrorism.
Widespread, and an embarrassing number of them fall apart under even mild scrutiny. This video was focused on the drama and commentary side of this dynamic. Ethan Klein, the people around him, and what they've done to the content creation ecosystem over the last couple of years. But truthfully, this is only half of the story. Hasan also gets a hysterical level of hate from the more genuinely politically oriented crowd too, and that stuff could probably be its own video. But at some point, the commentary slop guys started getting courted by the politics sphere to the Hasan bad cause anyway. And then when you have creators like Hutch, who covered Collargate for a
Yeah, that's the other side of the story. If it was just like Loner Box or the Ukraine guy or Hutch, if it was just those guys, then it's like pretty obvious. Like the audiences that they have are inherently political. So like they're slotting themselves into a specific ideology, specific ideological tendency. But these apolitical slop tubers don't do that. So they have a broad base. And this broad base is slated for, going on a political journey and learning more about the world, learning more about politics. And those guys end up developing this weird, unnecessary antagonism towards me and my worldview. And the unfortunate reality there is like, it's kind of sad that those guys often find themselves on this right-wing pipeline because they watched one too many fucking drama slop tuber videos. You know what I mean? They watch one too many drama slop tour videos and they go, I hate everything that this guy likes. I like everything that this guy hates. And that's it. Jedin deden Nesrin baban.